Hello, 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 everyone. How are you? This is Dionne Williams. Thank you so much for joining me today for this edition of Emerge Design Talk. I am truly excited and honored to have my next guest who will be on the show. I have been following his career for over 10 years. I research him, I study him. I'm honored that he's on the show. So, Mr. Ozwald Boateng, I'm going to put him on. Hello, Oswald.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored that you're on the show. Thank you so much joining me from London.
Yes, London from home. So yeah, London lockdown. Well, it's starting to open up now, so that's good.
Thank you so much. So let's just start from the beginning. My audience is emerging designers and creatives and people who just, know you and your brand. I just wanted to start from the beginning. And your parents are from Ghana and you were raised in London. I wanted to know, how was it growing up and how did you get into fashion?
Well, I got into fashion. I was studying computer science at North London College in early '80s. So and then, fun enough, I was convinced that technology, computer programming was going to be future.
Yeah.
And then I had a girlfriend in college who was an amazing artist who was designing a collection for the end of term show, and she basically convinced me to help her create this collection and design it and make it. I said, "You're crazy! I can't do that. I could probably design a program." And then she showed me how to do it, and I had sort of a natural ability for it. I mean, my mother always needs to make clothes at home, so there was a rejection of "I'll never do that," and lo
Yeah.
and behold, that's where I find myself. So at the end of it, I'm 16 years old and people want to buy what I've created. So that's how I ended up in fashion.
Nice. So I have, like I mentioned before, a lot of emerging designers on the show. How did you get your start in fashion? Like, when did you start designing and decided that you wanted to do this for professionally for a career?
The start was, I think anyone who gets into these creative fields as a business is usually by accident.
Yeah,
And so for me was very much the same. A friend of mine was a researcher on a TV show and was able to get me on it. And I was able to start meeting famous people. And I was very young, I was 17. So I had a chance to make clothes for someone known already at that point. But when I feel like you're kind of driven towards, there's an instinctive path when you kind of find your calling.
yeah.
It's difficult in the beginning. No, it's usually actually it's quite easy in the beginning. Then it gets difficult, and then it gets really difficult. The challenge really want it. And that was very much my journey. Of course, my journey starts way before that. Obviously when I go to school in London in the '70s, which was a very particular backdrop. But in terms of me discovering or understanding I wanted to be a designer was in the end, and it kind of unfolded in front of me. Can you hear me? Hello? Hi? I think
Okay,
I've lost.
you were going in and out. So I'm gonna.
Okay.
Okay, got you now.
Got me.
Uh,
Sorry.
how do you design your clothes? Like, you're a tailor, so how do you design? How do you describe your designs, your clothes?
I mean, the thing is when I was about 16, 17, I went to a very famous shop in London called Brown's. And the head buyer took these sketches. So I was, at this point, you're young and naive, and I thought this take sketches was enough for reason for a big store to buy your collection.
Yeah,
Went in with these sketches I had done, and I went to the buyer, and he looked at the sketches, and he said to me, he said they're interesting. I said, great, would you buy them? Buy these designs, all of them. And he looked at me as by sheer shock of my audacity of asking him effectively go and buy sketches for a famous store like Brown's. And he said to me, "What's the concept?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean concept?" He says, "What's your concept?" He said to me, "If you could tell me what the concept is, then I'd help you out, figure out a way to, find your collection." So of course I go home determined to understand what he was talking about. And then I realized what he meant. He was asking me the why. Why do you, right? And so that became a really important ingredient to create. I don't create anything without purpose. There's always a why. So the why was taking traditional design or tailoring and ways of modernizing it. So it was always called as a traditional way foundation and finding really interesting ways to modernize. And I did that through fabrication. I did that through my attention to detail, the way that I cut. And so these were the kind of the elements: fabrication, cut, and attention to detail were the three aspects that gave me my point of view. So much so I called the concept haute couture, which was a fusion of traditional tailoring and modern couture.
I love that. So one of your defining moments of your career was you opening up your store on Savile Row. You're known for doing that very early in your career. I want to know from my audience if you can explain to them what Savile Row is and how significant was, and still is that your store is there.
So Savile Row is the oldest street in the world for tailors. So in fact, in Japan, they even refer to the suit as Savile Row, right?
Yeah.
So it's the oldest of tailors, but I think more importantly, you could almost say the whole of British tradition, and what Britain represents as historically sits on that street.
Yeah.
A lot of the tailors that on that street have been making military uniforms for centuries. And as a consequence, what made Britain great? Military.
Yeah.
About its conquests, a lot of those very famous military generals had their suits made or with those famous tailors on Savile Row. So there is something very important in terms of British tradition. And if you think of how much Britain has influenced the world with its military, you can understand, you get a sense of the importance of that. So it was very important for me to open my store there, but not just open, but have an influence. Because I knew that already when I first came to Savile Row when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
To buy fabrics and sort of discover it. And then it took me from 18, it took me till I was 26, 27 to open my store there. But I always knew that if I could open a store on Savile Row and have an impact and influence, I could change cultural perspectives right across the board, because it had so much importance to British history, you see, and what Britain represents. So so it took me from 18 to it took me 8 years or something, 6, 7 years. I can't remember the exact numbers. 18, something like that.
That's such a big deal. So that's so great, that accomplishment.
Part of British history. There's no. I challenge if there's another street in Britain that is as relevant to British history.
Yeah. And so with your celebrity clients, was promoting the talk and used some of your celebrity clients that you had, like Jamie Foxx and Idris Elba and Will Smith. I did show a little clip of Will Smith and Bad Boy 2, which is that purple suit. How did you start getting into celebrity clients? Like, or are you missing award shows? Like, how was that for you with getting into celeb clients?
No, I mean, I've always the good news is I've always had exposure to well-known people and buying my clothes. I mean, I made clothes for Spike Lee's second movie, Mo Better Blues.
Oh, Mo Better Blues, yes.
I made clothes for it, and Spike Lee came to me in London even before I had my store on Savile Row. You know, he found me on the Portobello Road in my tiny little studio. So, you
Oh,
know, and
wow.
that's 90, you know. So, you know, there's been always a relationship with my clothing and, you know, film and celebrity from virtue from the beginning. And I think a lot of that's just got to do with probably the approach, because it's always very personalized. I mean, my background's tailoring, so
Yeah.
with Boateng, so it's very much about connecting a relationship with the wearer, you know, of the clothing. So it's, in a way, it goes beyond the clothes. It's the clothes are an extension of, in a film, an extension of who you are or you're acting. And if it's about you personally, then it's an extension of who you are. So I've always approached it in this way.
You know, I always wanted to ask you, you know, I've watched your documentary, which is one of my favorite docs.
Thank you.
Man story. I love it. I watched it again this weekend to prepare for today. And another defining moment of your career is when you were the creative director of Givenchy, which was the first African or Black person to be a creative director for Givenchy, as well as eating kind of Parisian house. How was that experience? I always want to know, how was that experience? I love watching the documentary and kind of showing some of the process, but how was that for you?
It was actually, it was really good actually, because, you know, up until that point, I've been only running my business. This is now is just going in and expected not to worry about the business, but creative.
Oh,
So
that's
in a way, it was like, it was fantastic. And no, I really, really, really enjoyed the experience. I mean, there's interesting thing in terms of my career opening up on Savile Row, or, you know, coming to creative director at Givenchy. Interestingly enough, I had opportunities to work LVMH before I was on She,
no.
and at the time, I was finding it difficult to find the right opportunity. They offered me a few opportunities, but I felt the timing was right, and I went for it. But I think one of the things I kind of underestimated, probably in Savile Row, I kind of knew that if I open up on Savile Row, I'd change cultural perspectives, and so I'd inspire a lot of people of color. You know,
Yeah.
that anything was possible. I knew that, and I also knew by doing a big catwalk show in Paris, which was a big deal in those days, being an English designer, it could create a global ripple, right? By having a store in Savile Row and doing fashion shows in
Yeah.
Paris. But the thing I probably didn't anticipate as much was the impact of when I became creative director at Givenchy, because I kind of understood already. I had a reputation at this point going in, and so I understood. All right, there's a big cultural point for me being understood that, but to the French Black people, it was quite something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll never forget. I was making Terry Henry, I'm not Terry, Patrick Vieira, a suit for his wedding, and he was, I think it was the captain of Arsenal. I think it was the captain on the French national team, I believe, when France won the World Cup. Now I don't know if you probably don't watch much soccer or football,
Not
but,
too much.
but it was a big deal because the majority of the team were Black and Arab. And so what happened was, when they were playing, there was a lot of sort of racial undertone about the team representing France, and that they would not do very well. They wouldn't succeed. Anyway, turns out they never lost the game and they won the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
And quarterfinals, semifinals, the whole nation is behind this team. So Patrick Vieira was a part of this. So he's in my studio as I'm making him this suit.
Yeah.
And, he says, I don't know how you were able to achieve what you achieved by being at Givenchy. And I'm looking at him going, but you just won the World Cup. And that's a huge deal. And, you know, I was there. I went to the game, you know, and that was exceptional. I was quite amazed by it. So the thing is sometimes, you know, the cultural uh, uh, impact, or what you want to happen, you're not aware of it when you're like in France. I had no idea that it was going to be as would mean as much, because
Yeah.
already so I'm here to do a job. I wasn't thinking too much of what I looked like. I thought I'd already made that point, So by the time I got into Givenchy, it was a very it was significant, definitely.
That's a good point, Oswald, like that you just brought up. Are you aware of the impact? I know maybe at that time you weren't aware of your impact, but now that time has gone on, are you aware of your impact, like with Givenchy and Savile Row and all the things that you've done?
I think I was conscious of it, definitely in the beginning, but then I think when you get on with the work, you're no longer conscious anymore,
Hmm.
and you just get on with it. I mean, obviously now, fantastic, interesting, tough moment where we can talk about color in a much more open forum. And my training was always to avoid the conversation around color, because then suddenly you're the angry black man.
Yeah,
So I worked very hard to avoid that stereotype, but we can have that conversation now. And there's no doubt that in my career, I experienced all types of racial, you can call it injustice or discrimination, or you can call it all those things. I've experienced all of them. I mean, as a kid growing up, even from 8 to 11 years old, I lived on the street with skinheads and teddy boys, which you probably don't know what that is in America, but they would be equivalent to some really far right, type kind of people I'm sure you understand in America, living on your street
yeah,
corners. So every single day getting to school was this aggravation. It was either racial abuse, spitting, or whatever it was. And they used to have two dogs, outstation dogs, which were trained specifically to bark at black kids. So that was something I grew up with as an everyday experience. Whereas historically, I would never speak about this.
yeah,
But it's time to speak about these things, and which is why it started to form. Uh, I started to form from an early age that I need to find a way to readdress this imbalance. So that's why set up on Savile Row wasn't an accident.
yeah,
I knew exactly. I knew exactly the impact it would have, not only me opening up on the street, but having an impact at the tailoring, to the extent I did, because it also was breathing new life into an old skill. So that in a way created its own revolution on the street, which no one will take that from me or deny me. I mean, I've been honored by the Queen as a consequence
yeah,
of that. But the kind of, at its core, was I wanted to have I wanted to change cultural perceptions of what it meant to be a black person.
yes,
That and then equally with Givenchy, I feel it was the same, not as in the same way, but because I wasn't exposed to. I did have some surprising racial issue in the company, and I remember at the time being really surprised that I was experiencing that, because
mm,
it was just, it didn't make sense to me. And it was from someone very significant in the company, and I remember having a lunch with him, and just him kind of really just telling me that how did I get the job? You know, I don't know how you got this job, but you know, I'm not gonna make this job easy for you.
oh wow,
And I was like, I quite literally, I couldn't believe it. And this is kind of like, this was before my first show for the house, so it was quite significant. But either way, the show fortunately was a success,
yes,
and we moved on from there. But it's an interesting thing to have those experiences, because sometimes you think maybe you reach a point where maybe it's not going to be like. But when you experience it, it's quite
Yeah.
it's a shocker. So you realize you never stop working on that. That fight never ends, which is a great about what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Now, for the first time, we're all speaking up,
Yeah.
not just
You.
not just not just in America, here in the UK, in
Yeah.
France, in Belgium, in Spain. We're speaking up everywhere. So it's a big one. It's great.
Now you have been very active during this time with this racial unrest that's going on. What do you think about what's happening? I know you've been protesting because I follow you. Uh, what are your thoughts on what's happening today?
I think what's happening is I think it's fantastic because finally we can have the conversation of you know what's right and what's wrong about the kind of injustices in terms of discrimination and racism and imbalances and economic imbalance. I'm of a big and I'm of firm opinion that African Americans should have reparations.
Mhm.
And and then I don't know if you saw my little short film.
I saw it. Yes.
It kind of sums it up. The usually the argument is, that's it's got nothing to do with me. It's my forefathers, or are the ones responsible for that.
Yeah.
The issue is that regardless of that, the reason why you're living as well as you are is because of the African Americans and the black slavery associated with that.
Right.
And so to kind of say, wipe your hands of it and say, well, it's got nothing to do with me, is, it's actually not. And it's very clear that the big reason in Americans or African Americans are suffering is economic. And so the thing about it's not so much about the amount, even though it should be in the region of 1.5, is it's the acknowledgement of the crime.
Yeah.
The crime against humanity, and it should be, the hand has to go up. You can't no longer say it's okay. It's not okay. So I mean, when the Jews were, after the Second World War, were gassed. 6 million Jews were gassed in the gas chambers. The Germans paid reparations. It's quite more practice when you commit a crime to humanity. Some form of acknowledgement and payment is made. It's in a way incredibly sad,
Yeah.
and also more importantly, and shocking
Yeah.
that in America they haven't done that.
And
And
you have been active in activism for most of your career. When you've done your work in Africa, you've done. I
20, 25 years at least, I'd say. But that's a very important point, and I think when I did my last fashion show in Harlem at the
which, by
Apollo,
the
I've
way,
always seen this
I told
important.
when we were on the phone last week, I told you I tried to get tickets. I happened to be in New York when your show. Ozwald did his last show in the United States was last year, 2019, and I happened to be in New
I
York.
did.
Tickets went so quick.
I don't know, but we won't make that mistake twice. But I've always looked at the bridge between cultures, between African Americans and Africans, and that collection was a definite celebration of that.
It was in it was in Harlem, um, at the Apollo Theater. It was all about Harlem Renaissance, Black masculinity. You
Yes,
also introduced your first women's collection there, so it was everything. I watched.
yeah, it was definitely, and I was very proud of it. Funny enough, my kids modeled in that fashion show. My son had never modeled before, but I put him in
Oh,
there.
that was nice.
That's very good. And
I have
so,
to go
but
back and see that.
it was no, it was really really good. But again, for me, it's always about this bridging of culture. There was always a deep rooted understanding. I mean, the collection was called AI, which meant authentic identity,
Yeah,
right? So that's the thing about being creative. You got to be true to what really is in spirit. you know. And I think when you do that, then your creative resonates in a very different way.
Also, I want to know, while we closing it up, what have you been doing during quarantine? Like, what are you going crazy? Like, you're a creative, so what have you been doing?
It was very tough in quarantine, actually. Initially, it was okay, you know, and then because I travel a lot, and so this time I was kept in one place,
Yeah,
and then where it was like, oh my God, what, this is quite emotional because I've never been that in a house on my own like that. Son was here, but he was in and out doing his thing. My daughter was in and out doing her thing, kind of boyfriend mother's house. So I spent a lot of time on my own, and it was, yeah, it was challenging.
yeah.
I've been used to because I'm also quite social, so there was no social contact, so it was
Oh,
quite challenging. And also, I live in town, so it's surprising enough, here in the middle of town, it was empty. I mean, there was no one on the streets. I've never seen Mayfair as quiet as this, So it was something.
I'm. It's very challenging for me as well. So,
It's difficult. I mean, it's on mentally, but I think this is where because we're all looking inward and as opposed to outward, I think this is what part of the reason why what happened with George Floyd resonated with everyone around the world in a very particular
yeah,
way.
that's right.
So, I put that to God's planning and timing on that because it erupted something which for me as a black man has given us all a little bit more. It's given us strength,
Yeah,
and willingness to express our truth, which is, I think, right in this moment is very important.
yeah. We have everyone's attention, so that's great.
Yes.
Yeah. So the last one of us saying, what should a man, any man have in his like? What's some essential things that men should have in their closet? One of them from Ozwald Boateng.
Obviously, I'd always say you need at least one suit. Yeah,
Okay,
the
one
one
suit.
that basically enhances every aspect of who you are, and then of course you got to have some casual pieces. So depending on what your preference are, I mean, we can at Boateng we can provide you everything.
So what's next for Oswald?
Well, next is the fashion show was about pulling capital into the business. There was some interesting investors, and so we're pursuing that now, and that's going very well despite COVID. And the idea is to set up base in America, in LA and New York, and that's the focus. I mean, America is something I've always wanted to make it clear and make a presence. I just haven't done it, and it's time to do it. And so I'm very excited about it because the fashion show was a good sort of tester for me to see. Firstly, the sport, the love and appreciation, which I got a lot of on that day,
Yeah.
and so a lot of confidence to come over and really commit to it. And so that's what we're doing now.
Well, thank you so much for taking out this time. I am a huge fan of yours. I tried not to fan out. Well, last week when we were on the phone and now, but I do want you to know that I've had, like I mentioned before, your contributions and your work is inspiring to others, especially me as a small business owner and also the owner of the Emerge Fashion Show. And just watching your documentary and kind of your career throughout the years, just showing your resilience and your inspiration, your inspiration, your creativity, all of that. I'm telling you, I studied your documentary when it started out, and you had the show, you hated it, and then the clothes were stolen. Like just
Exactly.
just your
Yeah.
tenacity, you kept going, and
Yeah.
to this day, I'm telling you, you are inspiration not only to me but to so many, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your words. That was very nice of you. Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully one day you'll accept our Fashion Innovator Award when next time you're at the Emerge Fashion Show, next time when you're in the States.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.